Cosplay. A hobby where people dress up as characters and attend conventions. A hobby where people all over the world come together and share their love for their favorite stories. While at first, cosplay was a niche hobby that only the truest geeks participated in, now cosplay is an art form shared by millions. Whether it be casually attending the local convention as your favorite character, or meticulously crafting your cosplay by hand and preparing for your biggest competition, thousands have found comfort, empowerment, and unity in this wonderful hobby, myself included. However, during and after the shutdown of 2020, many were forced to leave the community, people lost their careers that were a passion, and some have even been driven to take their own lives. Friends turned on each other and conflict rampaged. Cancel culture spread like a plague, and the community I fell in love with was left unrecognizable. But why? Politics. In this video, I'll be sharing my personal experience on the matter and discussing the problem and consequences whilst proposing a solution. While initially I never dared to speak on this topic out of fear of losing my hobby and career again, after coming to terms with the issue, I've realized how horrific it truly is. 2023 was the first year I majorly got back involved with the community since before cancel culture was rampant. I was amazed to learn just how much politicization and cancel culture in cosplay has affected so many. I was genuinely disturbed to hear how many everyday people had to endure severe torment and vilification, along with being denied to express their craft all over petty political and personal disagreement. But I had to admit, I was relieved to know I wasn't alone. As more instances of cancel culture in the general nerd community became more prevalent, such as the instance of 14-year-old Makani Tran, a teenage Pokemon the trading card game player that was disqualified for a tournament for allegedly laughing at being asked what his pronouns were by the judge. The teen says he was nervous and caught off guard by the question. This led to him being wrongfully banned from the tournament, and if you'd like to hear more about this story, please check out Clownfish TV's video linked down below. This is a prime example of how harmful cancel culture and political saturation in a hobby can truly be. Before I share my story, I want to explain how the community became like this. As they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. While I was still in my very early teens when I first got into cosplay back in 2018, the community was still, well, a cosplay community. I was impressed with how inclusive the community was, even though I had become a bit disillusioned by some of the self-deprecating behavior prevalent within the community. I had found the unity that I had once lost. Now, cosplays always cater towards a certain demographic, mainly high school and college students, which tend to be more progressive. However, I never felt a threat being non-political because it's still a cosplay community at heart. Again, regardless of your standings, the behavior that was normalized within the community is unacceptable under any circumstances. All that changed when the year 2020 came. Due to the shutdown of conventions, many cosplayers and creators had to find something to stay relevant, especially those with business, so many became avid about COVID and the various procedures surrounding it, along with the relevant politics. While it started out of concern and good nature, many ended up getting a power trip and began aggressively pushing narratives and stigma. The problem with all of this is that when one would even question things, whether they be procedures or even just suggestions to keep the community active regardless of intention or tone, they were treated as lesser and unintelligent, and many took it upon themselves to re-educate these people. Something I have to bring up is peer pressure. Whenever a new subject would go into popularity, it was highly expected that anyone who's anyone needed to claim to support or deny depending on the rhetoric. If not, you were seen as lesser, and as I stated before, anyone who even questioned the narratives regardless of their background and tone would be met with severe online abuse. Now, I am an advocate for freedom of speech. Anyone should be able to speak on the topics that are near and dear to them, but it should be expected that they go about it in a respectable and non-divisive way. But anytime I were to go onto social media, there would be posts upon posts stating to believe what the current media is saying without question, and that if you disagree with it, you are a horrible person. And in some cases, there are posts telling those in opposition to take their own lives along with inflicting violence on others. Cancel culture was a constant, and especially popular creators were outing anyone who disagreed and gaining tons of clout for it. Any opportunity people in the community got to virtue signal they would take, and there are even cosplayers who became popular for their political rhetoric alone, regardless of their character or craft. What had once gone from genuinely concerned people wanting to make a difference in the world around them became an aggressive force driven by insecurity and a need for gratification, along with, let's just face it, the fear of the standards that they created. If the community of old saw the actions that this led to, they'd be beyond disgusted. While cancel culture is not as constant as it once was, it's still a way too common occurrence, but many are unaware of what truly happens to the recipients. I'm going to shed some light on what actually happens to these people. I had just turned 15 when I was finally cancelled. It was at the end of the year, and I was fed up with the vilification and lies being pushed by the community. I remember just when I was 12 being in love with the community and being inspired by so many. Little did I know, over 2 years later, those same people along with dozens of others would demand that I take my own life, threaten to destroy my property, hurt my family, end my life, and most shocking of all, describe in graphic detail the way they want to defile me. Why? Because I am a conservative. And I was a 15-year-old girl one nonetheless. This conflict started directly after I shared my opinions on COVID lockdowns, and how the community was being very heinous with its rhetoric. While my wording was not classy and far from how I present an argument today, ironically, the wording was no different than what people had incessantly used for over a year. But since I was sharing my opinions on the matter from a different viewpoint, I was immediately attacked. Within 45 minutes, my page was consumed by hostility, while creators big and small demanded that I take my own life, along with the others who threatened to violate me, with all their comments being in as much graphic detail as possible. People described how I should be murdered and threatened my family, whilst of course lecturing me on how to be a good person, like them. People labeled me everything from a fascist and called me everything from a bitch to an alt-right slut. At this point, I've basically heard it all. I tried to take responsibility on the matter, however, the only apology anyone would accept was that I take my own life, or of course completely convert to their ideologies. And let's just say I was not in a negotiable mood. And honestly, I stopped caring what people thought of me, as if anyone did side with me or even question the others, I know they'd be thrown in the gulag along with me. I let out all my frustration there, and even though this fueled the flame, honestly it felt great. Also, I'll admit, I was envious of the people in this community who were so comfortable knowing that their most hostile feelings be considered, tolerated, and validated. Meanwhile, I am being ostracized and painted as evil. Even as I pled with the perverts that I was underage, everyone said, "We don't care." I was dehumanized and painted as a hateful bigot that didn't care about anyone's lives, safety, or well-being, while simultaneously they're threatening to end my life and defile me. They continued on completely blinded by their self-righteousness, and I continued on blinded by fury. This would later come to an end when a highly respected cosplayer in my community at the time with over 20,000 followers on Instagram alone came in and joined the conflict. Obviously, they sided with the others and upon engaging with me demanded that I off myself. I found myself pleading to her too, even though it's beyond futile at this point. I tried to use my personal viewpoint on COVID lockdowns and how they harmed my small town. Surprisingly, it actually seemed to strike a chord with her. However, immediately she made false accusations about one of the pictures on my Instagram being taken in front of an abuse shelter. This was not the case, even though there was a sign that donated to an organization for a shelter that I didn't think anyone would be able to see due to it being in the distance. She was able to pinpoint the city that I lived in and got my personal information. She proceeded to dox me to everyone, especially the perverts, telling them about my whereabouts along with her 20,000 followers. She was making it very clear that I was open season. At this point, my mother had been informed, and she realized sooner than I did the danger that I was in. She demanded that I delete the account. While I was very stubborn at first, I finally realized the danger I was in as well. I wiped the account clean, and thankfully my safety was preserved. Of course, my mother was incredibly concerned and asked how I felt, as this was a community I had cherished so deeply, and many of the people I engaged with I once looked up to as a child. Honestly, I could care less at the time, and I found it rather amusing considering the absurdity of the whole situation. And let's just say by the end of 2020, I was pretty desensitized to that kind of rhetoric. I was finally free of the community's pressure, and I knew I said everything I wanted to say. However, a lingering hint of reality set in. I remember exactly what I thought afterwards. I didn't hold any resentment as they were just doing what was right given the circumstances of late 2020. While the nature of the threats could be shocking at first, in the end, I wasn't surprised with the threats, because they were told to view people like me as literal Nazis. And how would you treat a literal Nazi? From their perspective, they're just doing the heroic thing. They've eliminated what they see as yet another fascist and saved the community. And they all did it without question nonetheless. However, deep down they know if they don't, they will meet the same fate. Considering how dear the community is to so many, losing that could be like losing family. As comical as I once found this, as I grew older, I truly began to realize the horrific severity of that situation. What started as people wanting to do their part in protecting people against hate, people who wanted to live up to the activists, feminists, and revolutionaries of old, ended up giving the first taste of tyranny. And it was then I knew the community that I'd once loved was dead. Or is it? A disclaimer before I continue, I'm not trying to generalize the community. I've had some truly amazing mentors, and there's so many that I'm honored to share this hobby with. I'm only trying to speak about a fraction that likes to abuse their power and how it affects the community as a whole. In late 2021, conventions returned, and I was beyond ready to get back to my favorite hobby. I immediately started competing again, and I had a great time at the conventions I attended, although I didn't want to get too close to the community at first. I wanted to keep it on a I like your cosplay basis, and have my social media be viewed as a gallery and less than a social account. Yet, coming back to the community in person, it had seemed like nothing had ever happened. It was like attending conventions before, however, albeit a little eerie. There would still be cancel culture, but I never decided to get involved. I knew being able to come back to the community was a delicate thing, and in the end, I wanted to dress up as characters and have fun and not worry about the nonsense of elites. However, as the next 2 years went on, I started seeing the beauty of the community and experiencing it too. While personally I felt conflicted, knowing how many see the community and how much joy it brings them proved to me that there may be hope for the future. Whilst I had my reservations, feeling inspired to branch out, maybe even help the community a little bit, I attended a photo shoot and a small event that truly made me realize the division wasn't forever. I attended a charity event catered towards families, and I was reminded of the heart of cosplay and what really brings cosplay to life. Seeing little kids interact with their favorite characters and those within the community sharing so much with others, which was really surprising considering how divisive the community was before. As the year continued, I met some amazing people who I shared so much with, including our experiences with cancel culture. I was shocked to learn just how many had been through what I had, the same threats, the same harassment, the same vilification, and yet some went through even worse. But knowing we weren't alone, we stood together and tried to put our best foot forward and remember what makes cosplay truly magical. But cancel culture is obviously not extinct, and some faced harassment and were attacked. Some were even nearly banned from conventions under false accusations. I tried to defend them the best I could whenever the harassment would come. This led to me finally bringing up the issue of cancel culture for the first time in 2023, and it was met with a mixed response. Something I want to bring up with cancel culture is the use of false sexual harassment accusations, as this is a disturbingly common occurrence. They use their desire to protect women and children in their community as their apparent driving force. This was always hypocritical to me for obvious reasons, when in reality, these accusations started over petty personal and political disagreements. This was proved later when I learned from one of my friends that was also cancelled by the same cosplayer that I was when I was young, starting because of political disagreement and that she had done this to others who disagreed with her politically. I was informed that she was an abuser from other cosplayers and had even groomed child cosplayers. However, the community didn't treat her with the same hostility that myself and the others were. In fact, many took pity on her. And unfortunately, I nearly lost one of my friends to this type of cancel culture. Unfortunately, this is the most effective and deadly method of cancel culture, as it's very hard to remove the veil of vilification put on you. A tragic case of false accusations in the community, along with how blindly the community acts, is the case of Vincent Plicchi, a 23-year-old Italian cosplayer also known as Inquisitor 3. He took his own life on TikTok Live after a girl, along with her friends, along with 2 very influential accounts, sent their mobs after him. Vincent stated he didn't want to work with children, so the girl pretended to be of age to start talking to Vincent. Convinced he was talking to an adult, little did he know it was the girl staging a conversation with him, along with conversations with her friend to plant false evidence on Vincent. This led to accusations of pedophilia and harassment that made the community attack him without question. This would lead Vincent to later take his own life in November of 2023. While some of those who were watching the live stream tried to stop him, in the end they were not successful. From what I know, the girl and her friend, along with the influencers, have not been charged nor given consequences. Vincent was a great person and will forever be missed by the community, and my condolences go out to his family and friends. Also to anyone else that may have lost family and loved ones in similar circumstances. More information on his story will be linked down below. It's not only the consequences of false accusations and cancel culture that are so devastating, it's also incredibly harmful to the community as a whole. Sexual harassment is a real issue, and petty elites using this as a weapon to get rid of people they don't personally agree with is beyond deplorable and diminishes a problem that seriously affects people. And not to mention, insanely hypocritical considering what they allowed in 2020. For some people, losing this community could be like losing family, and to be ostracized and severely vilified over misunderstandings and disagreements is beyond absurd, and obviously has a massive effect on people. That kind of betrayal is brutal. Obviously, cancel culture has created an extra level of elitism within the community, along with it being especially a problem in competitive cosplay and with cosplay influencers. I wish these people would see the error of their ways, which can be difficult due to the amount of clout that they get. But if by chance you are watching, please reference the story shared before you act. You inspire others, and you need to take that seriously and not be blinded by your personal bias. Along with anyone who believes their opinions, whether they be personal, political, or social, be more important than someone's well-being and livelihood, to seriously do some reconsidering. The damage that canceling others can do can be downright tragic. With the source of most cancel culture being political, it leads me to fearing the politicization of cosplay. With how obsessed those in the community have become with political correctness, with the obvious examples of it being held over others' well-being there to prove it, we need to think about what this could do to the community at large. But what do I mean by politicization? You see, Comic-Cons are an example of people all over sharing their love for their favorite creations, whether that be movies, games, TV shows, or books. Regardless of where you're from, there's going to be something for you that you will enjoy. Also, it gives opportunities for people to work outside of big corporations and independently, not to mention, even in some cases, start their own entertainment businesses. This freedom of expression, along with the natural unity between people connecting over a passion that has nothing to do with divisive subject matter, is something that is truly powerful and needs to be protected. Since Hollywood and the mainstream media are obviously set on division, the effects of it are clearly bleeding into the overall nerd community. It's dire that we have a means to come together, not just for nerds, but for society as a whole. Especially with how common interests like cosplay, gaming, and art are becoming, the community is only going to keep growing. With how fed up everyone is of the politicization of basically everything else, regardless of their standings, the need for non-political space is now more than ever. Now, imagine this expression of unity and creativity being dictated by political means. At this point, I'm not just talking about influential creators having a bit of a power trip. I mean, in this case, organizations, whether they be politicians themselves campaigning, or other politically backed organizations, using Comic-Cons as not only a means of monetary and political gain, but having control over events and creating a larger political presence. This may sound like a bit of a stretch, but it's a possibility considering how much political saturation there already is. An example is when I attended the largest Comic-Con in Arizona during 2023. I was looking through the programming scheduled, and there is a panel regarding political disinformation at a Comic-Con. I've also heard reports from friends that there are panels that just straight up talk about politics and from a heavily biased perspective. There's a such thing as a time and a place, you know. Don't people come to these events to get away from this kind of nonsense? Another detrimental fact that politicization of cosplay and the surrounding communities could lead to is a disinterest from international communities. Cosplay has united people internationally as well as locally, and I fear that if the community becomes so saturated by Western politics, international audiences will become aggrieved and lose interest in Western media. And finally, the complete violation of freedom of speech that this could cause. Famous media like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones have always had a brilliant method of bringing timeless commentary on things, whether they be war, rebellion, political theater, etc., in a way that was not being used for current propaganda and/or external political power, whilst being inspired by the time and environment of the creators. Instead, coming from the heart and generating a true story that can serve as an example for generations to come. With the turbulent times of the 2020s, many, myself included, have been inspired by these works and have a desire to create our own. With how restrictive large entertainment and publishing companies are, the community has provided an outlet for business, and if that creative outlet that our community is becomes tainted by restrictions, the ability to tell stories freely and honestly from all perspectives could be severely compromised. Regardless of whether or not we agree, if we are only able to tell stories through one political/social lens, that would be an infringement upon freedom itself, and not to mention a disgrace to art in its entirety. And finally, this could be catastrophic in the long run for society as a whole. It's hard to believe all this insanity happened over people who dress up as characters and attend conventions not agreeing politically with the other people who dress up as characters and attend conventions, but that is the nature of the time we live in, and with 2024 elections being right around the corner, I fear it may only continue to get worse. So, what do? I think it's time that the cosplay community became about cosplay. The community really needs to rethink its values. Are we seriously going to allow ourselves to destroy our community for ideologies being pushed by politicians that don't give a crap about us? Are we really going to let our self-righteousness blind us from what truly matters? Are we seriously going to preach about being feminist, pro-mental health, and anti-hate, while simultaneously bullying people to death, threatening to rape people including children, and judging others' worth solely on their personal and political views without getting to even know them first? And overall, diminishing the true weight of the issues at hand by using them as masks to hide insecurity? Are we seriously going to be known as hypocrites? We encourage rebellion and progression, but not as a means of achieving peace, but as a standard of social and self-worth. While abusers who uphold the correct beliefs are praised, those who even slightly disagree are punished and ridiculed. Last time I checked, cosplay was about dressing up as fictional characters and attending Comic-Cons. What does any of this division have to do with that? We need to depoliticize. I'm not here to infringe on others' freedom of speech, but people need to realize that they represent their movement. It's their responsibility on how they conduct themselves. Bullying people to death does not stop sexual harassment. Threatening to defile people does not stop a virus. Destroying one's career or hobby does not stop hate. And finally, canceling others does not save you from your failure, insecurity, or trauma, nor does it save anyone else from theirs. It only fuels the flame. Personally, I feel what's best for the community is to promote apoliticality, but I understand how important some of these matters are to people. We need to remember why we're here in this community in the first place, and use our love for cosplay as our driving force for protecting it. In terms of accountability, people who have solid proof of real criminal wrongdoings should be brought up with the proper authorities. Anyone caught wrongfully accusing others should be heavily questioned and let their own friends, family, and social group deal with them personally. As for the community, show we do not tolerate this behavior but not become violent hypocrites ourselves in the process. Because as much as people like to try, we cannot control who comes in and out of our community. If we try, we will only destroy ourselves. You must focus on protecting instead of attacking. Get both sides of the story before you act or don't get involved at all. And if you do, make sure it is for the right reason and not for your own virtue. And if there is real criminal behavior with solid proof, get the proper authorities. If you are concerned, start a conversation, ask someone why they feel that way. You may just be surprised, or agree to disagree. Obviously, connect with others in your community if you feel that there's a problem, but please go about it privately before taking anything public. Cancel culture spreads like wildfire and is very quick and can be very harmful not just to others, but to you. You have really no idea the situation you could be getting yourself into. And finally, stop putting so much value on political correctness and personal beliefs, more than any other trait for that matter. The amount of generalization that has become normal within the community is absurd. Treat people as individuals and not as a group. It can be hard, but believe me, it's possible. I know something or two about that. But if we are really the inclusive, progressive community we claim to be, then we should have the strength to put aside our differences. And finally, we're human. We make mistakes. We all learn from those mistakes. It's just a part of life. To question and criticize is normal, but we have to allow people to make up for those mistakes and have the humility to forgive them. If someone wants to take responsibility, let them, and if you cannot forgive them, leave them alone, because in the end, your personal feelings do not matter more than someone else's right to craft. The narcissism has got to go. When I'm describing this issue to others, I like to put it like this. You can make a political piece of art, but do not make art itself political. While I believe apoliticality is what's best for the community, obviously everyone will not feel the same way. But if we can all agree on one thing, if that cosplay and other means of self-expression become politicized and are used as a weapon by people who do not have our best interests at heart, with how much tragedy this has already caused, and if it doesn't stop, the problems this division will cause in the real world will make cancel culture look like child's play. I hope you all found this video informative. This video comes from my desire for the community to be as it once was. I always wondered why God gave me the desire to create this community, especially with all I've had to put up with. But I want to show that there is hope for the community, and if not, help create it. If you have experienced cancel culture and would like to share about it, please feel free in the comments sections, and if you have any questions or opinions on the matter, please speak freely. While I am concerned this video may be controversial, this is a horrific issue the community has refused to discuss for too long, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not afraid of a little controversy at this point, as long as it means protecting cosplay from those who would like to weaponize it. Or should I say, cosplay is not a means of warfare.